So, one of the most important questions that anybody asks is, what if? And What If is actually the title of a 1952 science fiction story written by Isaac Asimov. And in that story, it's about a couple who is riding a train, and they meet a little guy who shows them how the future or their lives could have been if different things had happened. I was born in Juarez, Chihuahua.
Yeah.
Arriba Juarez! And it was apparent from the very beginning that I was quote-unquote cieguito. All right? In my culture, when you add I-T-O to the end of a word, it usually means an endearment. All right? My parents a lot of times would call me Raulito or Mijito, right? Everyone knows Mijito, right? All right. So it just basically means little one. But a lot of times when you add that ending to a word like a person who is ciego, which means blind, it can be demeaning. And people don't do this because they're mean. They do it generally because they don't know better, or they want to try to help out without knowing that or realizing that a blind person can do everything that anyone else can. Yeah. When my parents saw that I was blind, one of the first things that my mother did was go to a church to ask for some help, to see what could be done, what sort of resources were there. This was when I was a few months old. And the church people said, chances are all he's going to do is be a beggar. Okay? They weren't trying to be mean. It was just ignorance. They honestly didn't know. So what if my parents had listened to that? I wouldn't be here now. No. That was one of their motivators to move to the U.S. and become naturalized and give me a chance to succeed. In fact, Houston was probably one of the very first cities that I came to, although I don't remember it because I was very young. And they tried to fix my vision. I have glaucoma. Some of you may have glaucoma, or some of you may have other reasons. The reason I'm blind really isn't all that important, because the fact is I am. And I don't really worry about what if, because my feeling on the past is that it's what defines you in the present and helps shape you in the future. And so I am very grateful to my parents for making the decisions that they made. And later on in school, they pushed for me to learn Braille. This was in the mid-'80s when there was no such thing as IDEA. And the teachers naturally wanted me to use a CCTV at 36x. I could read maybe one or two characters on the screen. There's just no way I was going to be a fast reader. And so my parents pushed, and they were able to find a teacher who's willing to teach me Braille. And they made it happen. I didn't realize any of this stuff as I was growing up. I just knew that teachers all of a sudden were teaching me Braille, and I was reading the End of the Sidewalk book. And so I learned to read Braille when I was 8. And at the same time that I was learning how to read Braille, I was learning how to speak English. Up until about 8 or 9, Spanish was my primary language. Wow. So English is really my second language. So as I grew older, eventually I got to math class. I used to have math lab when I was in 4th grade. They had math lab. And I remember they had the Apple IIe computers with a really bright cursor. I could change the cursor really bright. I used to draw pictures on the Logo program. Anyone remember Logo? Yeah. All right. I love drawing those because you had to input in coordinates, and you got to do a little bit of programming. Long story short, that's how I started liking computers, and I would go and first thing I would do with any program is first go into settings and options just to see what could be changed so I could see what I could break. So eventually I got to high school, And I was doing most of my work in Braille. There were still a few things that I did with large print. But at the age of 14, my pressure in my eyes got really bad. It was a painful thing, quite emotionally and physically. As it is, it's tough being a teenager and going through high school. But when you add losing vision on top of that, I really did feel traumatized. It was a traumatic thing. And that's not to say that blindness is traumatic, but the experience, and when you don't know, or maybe you don't have other blind friends, it was scary. I went into high school being a quote-unquote low vision person. I came out totally blind.
Wow.
But I graduated. I wasn't at the top of my class, but I believe I was like number 15, which was good for me. I like that. I can live with that. I started using, at the time, a little portable device. It wasn't quite a laptop, but it was called a Small Talk, and it was made by a company called Computer Aids. They eventually became GW Micro, and I remember saying at that time, I'm going to work for these guys one day. I love their program so much. Years and years later, that happened. So I actually lived my dream. And they actually approached me. They said, are you interested? We know you've been a user of our products forever. We know you advocate for us, blah, blah, blah. Would you like to come work for us? So I went from freely answering all their questions on their public email list about vocal eyes and window eyes and all that stuff to actually getting paid to answer it. So I thought that was kind of cool. Before then, I used to, actually, I worked in what Curtis Chong deemed as the real world. I got my customer service experience working at Pizza Hut. This was when I was 18. I graduated high school and I was looking for a job, and I heard that Pizza Hut was very flexible about hiring people who were blind. And so I walked in there, I went on my own, and I said, I'd like to apply for a job. They said, were you referred to us by Voc Rehab in Denver? Who? They said, everybody who comes here who's blind is referred to us by Voc Rehab. I said, I don't know what you're talking about, I just want to work. They hired me, so I actually got a job without going through Voc Rehab. So that was a big confidence booster. I was the first blind person at their call center to surpass just being an order taker. All the other blind people who worked there were only order takers. That's all they'd done for years and years. I said, this is not enough. I need to do more. So I moved on to doing customer service. I got to actually learn how to handle irate customers.
Oh, wow.
Like the kind who would order a pizza with 6 meats on it and thick crust and then complain that it wasn't cooked all the way through. And then they'd say, well, can you cook it extra? So then the crust would be cooked all the way through, but then the toppings would be burnt on top. Basic physics here, folks. But that taught me patience. That taught me how to relate to people. Eventually, I moved on from the pizza industry business, and I moved on to cable TV. Cable TV, actually, my blindness is actually what got me hired with on with cable TV, because I was looking for a temp agency. Don't you just love Structured Discovery? You go to the wrong place. So I go into a building thinking it's a temp agency. They said, no, this is a cable company. I'm like, what's the name of your cable company? Because at that time, it was just TCI of Colorado. And they said, we're American Telecasting. I'm like, who? They said, we're a wireless provider, kind of like what HBO used to do back in the 70s. You know, little satellite stuff. We broadcast through microwaves. And we're hiring. Do you speak Spanish? I said, sí, hablo mucho español. They said, we're hiring. So I got a job just because I found the wrong building and because I spoke Spanish. Eventually, that company got bought by Sprint. Sprint didn't buy them for the TV service. Sprint could have cared less about the TV service. Sprint wanted those FCC licenses for wireless because in 1998 through 2003, Sprint had a service called Broadband Direct. And it was a very innovative service. At the time, it was 3 megabits per second down and 1 megabit per second up, which is really slow by today's standards, but at that time, when most of America was on dial-up, it was innovative. And I was able to, that's the last time I ever really used dial-up was in 1998, because I went to broadband real early. And so they hired me on, I got carried over onto the Sprint side of things as a Unix network administrator. So when you see in the movies about, we gotta call someone to fix that, I was that team of someone. We were the ones that were kept in a corner. Most everybody had the pasty white skin. They never actually talked to anybody because they didn't get any socialization. That's right. And so we were somebody. So we would support tier 1, 2, and 3 folks who were handling all the customers. And that's what I did. I got a lot of network experience that way. And so I kind of skipped around, but eventually that's where GW Micro knew about who I was, and they hired me. So I love Sprint. Actually, they ended that program, and so we all either got laid off or we moved on to somewhere else. So I eventually moved on to GW Micro, and by that time I figured after about a few years of working with GW Micro. In addition to doing WindowEye support, I was also the BrailleSense and the BookSense product manager. So a lot of those features that are in those devices now, it's like those devices are like my kids. The one feature that I like a lot is the flipping around of the display to make it easier for a teacher to read when that little LCD thing is on. I had them do that. But eventually I left GW Micro because I wanted to do a shift in career. I didn't want to do support anymore. I had a bit of experience with training people, and I thought, this is really cool. This is like customer service, but I can actually show off what I know and get paid for it. So I was all about that. So I switched, and I couldn't get a lot of work in Indiana because Indiana's smaller population, and it's everybody there was established already. So I moved to Houston. I heard that they were looking for AT trainers as contractors, that DARS would hire me on the spot and I would work. So I moved in late 2012. Well, it wasn't until 2014 that DARS hired me on the spot as a contract trainer. A little slow there on the government side of things. In the meantime, I found, it was quite by accident because I went into the seminar thinking I was not going to get anything out of it, was the I Can Connect thing. And so I Can Connect is for deaf-blind people. So I actually got onto that first before starting working for DARS. So I know I'm just about out of time here, but I do want to say that since then, I've basically rebooted my life. And I've started over in a way, got my own business, actually gave it a name. It's RGA Tech Solutions. The RGA is actually like a monogram of my name. I can thank my daughter for that. She said that my initial RAG just wouldn't sound very cool, so I'll use RGA for the monogram. One thing I like to share with everybody is a quote. It says, "The only way to do great work is to love what you do." If you haven't found it yet, keep looking, don't settle. That's exactly what I've done, and I love what I do. So thank you, everybody.